So this is the behind the scenes making of this sci-fi HUD. And also, where's the last song? There's a song else. Yeah, here we go. I'll just listen to a song, having a good time with it. Anyways, I want to do a tutorial about this sci-fi HUD concept that I've been messing with. So this is kind of the result that I'm hoping to go for. Just something real basic just to get people acquainted with self-cut, maybe in a creative situation, and also making use of commotion. So we'll save this, and do I even want to try this in a single take? Dry runs have been doing it pretty good, so we'll SX2, and let's see, this is our practice round. We'll press C, make this the custom cutter, which means that now every cut will be based off of the mesh. And so I've just been experimenting with cutting in different corners. Usually I cut in sequential areas, but I've just been jumping back and forth, just kind of playing with my exponents with varying size rectangles. So, if you're playing with custom cutter, I recommend giving it an experimentation as well. You might find a combination that's even stranger that gets a more interesting result. But, I'm just trying to show the results I've been getting lately. In fact, the more you mess with this, the more random it gets, because there are limits to the Boolean, as you saw right there. So I will need to probably point that out in the video. Just be like, hey guys, Boolean errors, bro. It's always good to point this sort of stuff out. Definitely not trying to hide from any issue or present a false picture of what you can expect when using these products. I've been adamant about sticking with the exact same version that you guys have out in the wild. So the bugs that you experience, the things you hate, I have them as well. And together we'll see them be fixed in the next update when that comes out. But I think definitely gotta dial back the forensicness of working on tools. It's just madness, for more complaints than anything. So gotta dial that back. Focus more on videos, just having fun. So here we are, just doing our cuts, and this is a pretty good little grid formation. It's like a bunch of trains. Like when I look at them flashing, I kind of imagine them like different levels or floor structures that have fallen. So the next thing is, well, I don't know why that light's there. I don't even know why this camera's here. Let's talk about cameras being where they're not supposed to be. So we'll bring in some text, and I'll pop open a font, and I actually have a bunch of fonts I like, so we'll just go with the first one that I like, which is this one. I just noticed it's been good to me for saying things like warning. Yours doesn't have to say warning, it could say, landing, or we'll say breach, and we'll duplicate it inside of here, and we'll say something like level 1, maybe level 2, maybe this one could be level 2. We'll say confinement. I was thinking last time I was working on a HUD, I was like, I should make sure I'm not picking words I can misspell. I was never a spelling bee champion. For this one, we're just going to put the number 3. This box brought to you by the number 3. This one brought to you by 7. And this one can be 8. And this one can be 11. I think 11s are cool looking now. I've been thinking about it. I was like, no one talks about how hard surfaced the number 11 is. So, shout out to 11. 11 be holding it down, looking like some double ones, For this one, we'll just put an X. X is, I'm going to give it to you, just so you know. So, we got our things there. The next thing is, I've been modeling some bars, and bars are, when you're modeling 2D stuff, It's ridiculous. You know, we take a plane. First, we got to apply the scale. So once we apply the scale, then we can double Y and just scale this in. I mean, I'm sure there's more efficient ways I could have done that, but we'll just put a couple of loop cuts in here and just bevel them, delete them, and those are bars. You know, we could get more into it with it, but really just bars. So we'll put one here. We'll actually delete 2 ticks from it. You know, this area is just not doing as good. This area, we'll take a bar from that one. You know, the place is progressively getting worse. 8. We'll just let it keep the same amount of bars for 11. We'll go in and just remove one more. And then we'll select this and then duplicate it down here. And the reason that we selected that other piece before we went out of edit mode is so we can just delete it there. Just, you know, really fast working in a way. And so I always like to frame these HUDs with some little walls. So maybe something like that would do. Didn't apply that scale again, so it's going to be a weirdo. And if we bevel these individually, I found that it's a little bit easier to deal with. In fact, we can just deselect these with circle and remove the edges, and that kind of leaves us with something like this. So we can also just do some random broken bars at the top and bottom. I mean, I'm always just trying to cram additional different design ideas in these things. I mean, we could still go in here and cut this thing, but I feel that because we have exponentially insane cutters going on, that we're just kind of playing with our odds. So the next part of the tutorial involves me, I assumed that everything would be made level because I'm just a level modeler like that. But you'll take everything and, you know, first you have to exit boxcutter because text objects will just be deselected when you hold control because snapping and boxcutter has a filter. And so once everything's applied, then we can begin talking about dissecting this up a bit. And what I mean by that is if we were to, let's actually make a custom cutter for this. I've been experimenting with different ways of approaching this portion. And usually I just use slice, but you know, what if we used our old buddy cyclic ingon again, which is always a fun time. And we could just press D, or actually we're in custom, actually we're not in custom. What's wrong with me? Now we're in custom. We could just select that and just do some random cutting. And you know, you might be wondering why I'm doing such things to this mesh. It's because, you know, I don't care. I don't care. No, I'm kidding. I do care. I care very much. I care too much, some would say. So we'll just make these cuts in here. And we're just continuing making these cuts. Just really just breaking up the surface. And it'll just make for a more interesting commotion build, I've found. So in my previous demos, I think I also showcased the same thing. Same approach of just slicing things and just splitting them up in 2D. It's just a fun way to get some breakage happening. In fact, as I'm cutting, I'm happier with every cut that I'm doing because there used to be a time where such things weren't possible, and I'm seeing now that, you know, when I go through the demo, this rehearsal round probably wasn't even needed. Like, I'm always referring to single takes and double takes internally. I'm like, hey guys, I was able to show your feature. It was a double take. And basically that means you could have done better. on your particular feature for your showcase. And you know, it's always my fault. You know, I'm also the guy managing the tools and their creation, so I should be more picky. But I'm also capable of relenting to not get very obsessive, because I can get pretty obsessive. We can delete that and I'll select everything, and with this selected, we'll just make the visual geometry a mesh, and we can see that this thing got destroyed. Let's see, can I select that? You know what, I don't even want to bother with that, because you know we won't see this stuff in the end. But we'll select everything, press P, loose parent. So I probably got to watch it with my slicing. I would probably went a little slice happy with everything, and I don't know why so many things are still joined together, because my goal was to cut them apart, but we see that there's all these continuous edges in here. So I really got to watch it when I press my luck on this, because this could result in results that are undesirable. In fact, all this auto parenting stuff is also very undesirable. But if we continued on with the test, I'm just going to assign one thing a blank material, and then assign everything that same material. And I can see that even for just assigning a material to like 1,000 items, that it's going to be a little bit slow. So that's something also that maybe means I shouldn't deviate so far from the workflow that I had. Like sometimes I experiment with the workflow that I'm doing, or I'll just go off the cuff in a video just to be random and try to go for a result that's unique, that's never before seen. And I don't know, I do it a lot, but here's an example of me just kind of operating outside of the plan, and it coming back to haunt me. I forgot about the issue where if you split something apart into, let's see, was this 1,767 parts? Probably the fastest way to assign it would have been to assign it to something big, select everything, have an active selection, and use Control L, link materials, which uses the C++ version inside of Blender that's built in. I mean, we can't compete with anything that's built into Blender, which is why we so desperately want to be able to change Blender itself. But while I'm waiting on that, I mean, that thing's a wash. Even if it goes through, I think I pretty much learned what I needed to learn, and that is, you know, be nimble. I mean, where are we at on this video? 13 minutes, so I would have been having to pause at some point, and that would have been undesirable. So I've been doing this test lately where I will press SX2 and then look at something from the top and just draw an end-on cut like so. Extrude it down, we can press B to bevel it, and we get something like this, right? So I will select this edge, control click to mark, and just to save you the trouble, I could tell you that if a V group is after a difference, it's going to destroy your vertex order. So by placing it second, it makes it more sensible. So we'll just go ahead and just adjust the auto smooth and make a few box cuts. And really, let's look at this from the side, and I want to draw a box here, but let's extrude it this way to the other side and put that through. We'll mirror it to the other side. And I don't even want new modifiers. I actually need the same modifier. So if we look at this, we can see that we're getting kind of wacky here, but that's fine. We're back in control. We'll look at this from an angle, maybe cut a little trench in there, something nice. And from the back, I always get like experimental with my cutters and just cut like these really interesting like sawtooth patterns, and then just work them in. Sometimes I don't even go all the way out the back. I'll just come all the way close to the back, and you know, I'll even do it from the side here. We'll just start in view align, which is where my first point is, and we're just creating just a interesting kind of pattern here. Nothing fancy. So we can select this, control click it to get a very interesting result, and that's because it's before the mirror. If we put it before the mirror, it's going to work, but if we don't have it up at the top like the other V group, it's just not going to work out for us. So I'm just shift rolling it up the stack, and we get something like that. So the next thing is we just go under here and we use dice. And to show the improvements of dice, in fact, let's fix that smoothing real quick. Can't have inadequate smoothing ever. So anyways, back where was I? So we go into dice, and while we're using dice, we just press T, which will smart apply, but it also accidentally undid the vertex group, which shows that a few more refinements will need to be made with smart apply, but no worries, we just lost a little bevel. So we will just click to go through, and I'll just roll this down to something like 3. I don't know, something about low twist just appeals to me. In fact, 4 is almost too many for me now. You know, we bring this down to 3, we get a shape like this. And this is part of like a dice demo that I'm preparing in the future, where I want to talk about how you can basically dice and twist from the same operation, but you can also say go back under twist 360, and instead of modifying it, you can press Shift D and it will duplicate it and make a second version that you can then begin modifying. So if you're just trying to create some sort of dice masterpiece, you could just go into twist 360, press Shift D, and it will put you in a modal of a duplicate of a second version. So you can just keep replicating it to make like more of these dice maquettes. So we go over here. This blender is dead to us. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. We're just going to do this by the book, linear, without any funny business, all right? So I'm just bringing up a second blender. Only the people watching the director's cut will know that I have a malfunctioning blender underneath that just malfunctioned because of my choices. I always forget about the thousands of meshes thing, which is something that I talk about all the time with the team. And they're like, hey, you know, you tried a very large batch operation right here. That's why it got unstable for you. I'm like, oh, so I gotta be more efficient, but also need more geometry. You know, it's like a conundrum. What do you need, more geometry or more efficiency, or more geometry and more efficiency at the same time? I mean, it's always a balance between how much can we let mods do for us and how much do we have to do by hand. But let's get in here and make this HUD. In fact, I think I got the confidence to record this on a first take. So let's go ahead and start this over from, we'll use a 716 template, which I just make these based off of the last file that I was working on. This one's probably a self-cut menu was cool if it had an ad in the middle of the video by me. And we'll call this and there's so many ways to make HUDs. I actually figured out a way to make a HUD in like 50 seconds, but I'm saving that one up. We'll talk about that one another time. So just fitting this inside the window, and there we go, we're good. So the next thing is let's prepare to get in and get making a HUD. So like Zach from Final Fantasy always says, always follow your dreams. Just kidding, I'm kind of corny saying that all the time, but I don't know, confidence building. You gotta believe in yourself. Take a drink of water. That way I don't get the coughs. You know, I don't want to coof in the middle of the video. Guys, I don't know if I can do this. Just kidding. In fact, I don't even know if I can do this without getting weird. In fact, we'll do one more just test run. And I'm already thinking in my head that I could do this, keep it live, you know, select this, you know, using active only under behavior, and just start doing some stuff like that, just to get like some interesting patterns, and even take that and do something like that. And then we could even take that and just press, you know, QOT and get back a cylinder. And if we get a cylinder shape, that means that we can scale this out, cut this whole thing out, give it solidification. But this will expose a small bug. Or it's not a bug, it's a feature we weren't able to add in, and that is 2D extractions, which I'm surprised no one has asked about yet. But just know that I always try to think of every angle with you guys. You know, these comments of people saying, oh, there's too many features, it just makes me sad. Like, you know, the other answer is to just tell all you guys no all the time, which makes me feel like a jerk. You know, I can't relax if I feel like a jerk. So, but I do want this tool to be its best version of itself. So I'm just experimenting real fast with a alternative way of just drawing some random elements. And we could probably do even better than that, where we really give it some thickness. Maybe something like that. I don't know, this could be a completely different experiment altogether. But this is, you know, this is how it happens. Sometimes hops will inspire you in the middle of using these tools. So I always feel terrible when people are like, I'm having problems installing it or it's not working. You know, there's so many different variables that come into play. And I mean, people just want to jump into Blender 2.8, and it's like the craziest time to jump into Blender. So it's like jumping into a meat grinder. But if you make the successful jump of getting things installed and understanding your installation, I feel that you'll probably be set up for success as far as the future goes. So something like this, you know, I wonder if you're wondering, what am I going to do with this? Because if you are, I have no idea. But I have an idea. I mean, as I cut, it just gives me more ideas for this idea. Like, you know, we can do this idea. So let's do this idea. Control A, visual geometry to mesh. This piece is its own piece now. So let's just separate it. And on this thing, let's, you know, I've been experimenting with using the, you know, pound COS and just frame times 10. And that gets you something like that. And then when you times it by, you know, 0.0010, you get something that's like ever so slow. But you can get something that's like bobbing back and forth. And I don't know. I want to integrate this into my style of working, but it's just one of those things. I mean, I'm no math magician, but I know that, you know, when you get this thing working right, it gets you something that's kind of bobbing back and forth. And I see some value in that. I mean, with everything, I'm always looking at it, I'm like, what can this be? What can this be that it's not today, you know? And I mean, everything in hops, like I always try to say, is like a Lego block, where, you know, if you look at it like a thing that you get and it's your thing forever or something, like general ownership, you'll probably be a little brokenhearted, because everything's a Lego block. If anything, you're falling in love with a block of something that is an unfinished. It's like falling in love with a cinder block, because in the end, you know, all these tools will be fairly automated. I think consolidating a lot of, you know, what we deal with in our current line of work. In fact, you know, this tool is a big experiment in automation. So we want to snap origin to cursor, which means we can now do this. And we also want to snap its origin to cursor, which means we could do this. So for these, you know, we can have them also be built around this, but we have them rotate inwards and scale and come back out or something. So the way that that would work is through constraints. I like actually playing with constraints. I just get random with them. My favorite constraint of all is the transformation constraint, because you can take this one and receive data from one thing, like I want to receive the rotational data of the Z, I guess the minimum of, 0 and let's see, what kind of rotation are we getting? We're getting -50. It's basically 60 to 60. So -60 to 60 is what we're taking in on the rotation. What we want to do is map this to the rotation of the Z as well. So Z to Z, and we could just make this 90. So now it actually rotates like so. We can put in 5, it'll rotate like a little girl. We could put in 90, and it'll just get some extra numbers out of it. Like now we're really jumping up the range. We can even make it go all the way around just on this basic action, So I find this to be a fun way of working. In fact, we'll rotate it all the way around till it goes back where it started. And I don't like how little it gives us here. There we go. So it's kind of crazy, but it's just something I like getting into. So we'll go back to frame 1, and we'll select this, and we'll I guess copy constraints. And I can already tell you that I selected the wrong order. Oh wait, no, it worked. So we will take this -905 and we'll put in 370, and then we'll paste that here. So basically they'll rotate the wrong way on each other. I don't know. I'm just thinking of like just randomness. So we could even take this thing back to the beginning and have it copy the same constraint. Actually, let's try that again. And instead of it being on rotation, we can have it be on the location. And let's say we wanted to map Z to X. So Z, let's see, Z to X, and on the X, we'll make it where it moves 20. So basically we get something like this. And I'm just trying to see how close it makes it in here. And we just want to make sure that makes it all the way in. And we're just playing with like the idea of machinery. I'm just goofing off here. This is what I do on my downtime, by the way. If you're ever wondering what I'm doing on my computer, just in between tutorials, I'm just playing with ideas. Like I feel like there's so much untapped potential inside of Blender, and people are all the time showing very creative ways to get things done. And I'm always curious and getting into that kind of thought process, because it's so cool. Like November was a big eye opener for me. It got to show me basically what all the users in the community are kind of capable of, and it showed me they're capable of a lot. So another thing too is what if I wanted to play with the scale? A way I've also been experimenting with that is using an empty. So we'll just grab this thing, and I'll just copy the driver, and we'll just paste driver, paste driver, paste driver. And this is actually, that's not what we want. We actually want to put that in the scale. So there we go. And so with this to this, we can just, I think Control-Alt-Shift-C was the thing, but we'll just add constraint, and we'll do a copy scale. And that's what happens when you have the selection order backwards. Some things in Blender require a different selection order. This is one of them. And so for this particular object's constraint, we can actually make it where it doesn't go all the way in. But we've really created just, I don't know, randomness. Sometimes I'm just being random. I mean, if you stack these up just right, put some thickness on them, think it'd be like a future weapon or something. But one day, coming to a tutorial near you, I'll make this idea make sense. I mean, I already see it as like a rigging thing already, but anyways, I should focus on the topic at hand. I was supposed to be making like a crazy UI, and here I am getting distracted by nonsense. In fact, we'll call this nonsense, and we'll get back to work here because I shouldn't be getting distracted, and I'm already over here getting distracted. All right, so let's save this and Control N, make a new file. And so we can do this. We can get in, we can make this HUD without any problems, all right? You know, one thing I should test is what if I had a plane and we did like one of these numbers, right? And then we pressed Alt X, but we pressed X to reset the modifier because that's a thing. And if your modifier is dirty on the mirror side, when you bring up the new gizmo, just press X and reset the darn thing. So something like that probably. And then we could attempt to use something like dice, but if we use twist, then it should dice this and then allow us to twist it afterwards, which it didn't work out there. So let's try that again. If we look at this, we have all of our modifiers back. So we will dice, but we will press T, which will smart apply. And if we press Q, we'll use mesh intersect this time. And this is kind of what we're generating when we pull back. So it almost looks a little simplistic like that. Too simplistic for what I aim to create. As far as like design language, it looks kind of terrible. So let's try the idea again. This time we'll go for something more streamlined and more quiet. So, you know, to me, stealth is my favorite tick ever that I put on everything. And old habits dying hard is me putting that tick twice. And me just being just crazy is doing a little bit of that. And you just got to put a crazy pattern in it that requires too many keystrokes, so something like that. And then we can dice, and we can press T and see how this looks. And I can already tell you that it's not the desired result. So I always wanted this like kind of oops button, where basically if you make a mistake, you can bring these things up again and actually redo them the way that they're supposed to be done. Because I keep going in here and I keep using knife, because knife is supposed to work, especially with 2D objects. But we see now that in this particular iteration of Blender, at this moment in time, in this multiverse, that mesh intersect is the one that we actually want to create this particular pattern. So sometimes it'll seem like something's not working right, but sometimes it's also Blender just changing on the fly, just being random. So some things we just can't fight against. All we can do is just give you multiple options and just hope that the right option's there in front of you, because, you know, just not giving you the option may not be the most appropriate solution for you. And we certainly get our chatter from those customers who aren't happy with having less choices. So we'll click to apply that, and if we look at this and only render, looks good. I mean, we could take this and just material scroll it, where we press TT to get some emission, and we get in here and look at it, maybe press Alt VV, Q to add some emission pulse. And this is kind of the idea for the pattern. So maybe something a little more quaint, a little more quiet. Something that'll cause a, you know, makes me think of Halo when I get so thin and narrow, or Ponte. So let's see, I think we can do this. Also want to implement the box cutter logo in it. You know, I've been holding back on tutorials, not showing off enough how you can just use the box cutter logo to do things. One of my favorites is just dicing the logo. So here we are with our logo. On the side, we have our mesh. And I can tell you from doing this demo over and over, I always switch it to slice. And we gotta switch to custom, press C. And let's do this destructively. I'll press period during my draw to get back my corner draw. Look, I'm gonna press spacebar, and then I want to actually run that back. What does my cutter look like? It doesn't even show me a cutter for that. Geez, something's going on with slice and destructive now. But no worries, we'll just keep rolling with the punches. I'm not even sure what that could be. So strange. Especially because I do these tests like every single day, like a monastery. Just wake up and just start running through the things that I plan to demo weeks from now. In fact, it causes me great anxiety when things I'm about to showcase in the future get broken by Blender updates. I'm like, oh guys, we gotta wrap this update up so this thing we take pride in doesn't get demolished. We'll set origin to geometry, unparent, and you know, pressing all of this stuff is just so many keystrokes. Look, we try to use add rigid bodies. We want to use the option called add rigid body. It's kind of crazy that the Blender has multiple options with the same name, but you know, that's Blender for you. There we go. There's our logo breaking up just like a champ. I don't know what happened with spacebar there though. So that's something that I'll definitely be needing to check into. We've been trying to gather any bug reports for a micro update, but there hasn't been really anything egregious that requires that we do any updates at this moment. You know, always individuals with strange press will run into strange issues. Some things just can't be helped. Also, using this with parent shape on isn't the most helpful thing right now. So we press spacebar and we see that it was probably parent shape that was making things weird, slicing and destructive. So a little bit of troubleshooting. That's why it's important to not just jump in the bug channel. Well, for me, to just jump on people and be like, all right, we gotta fix this bug, because you know, sometimes it's actually related to a previous decision that was made. And while you would think something like auto parent would just be the easiest thing in the world to implement, it completely isn't. We've tried to implement it multiple times, and every time we get a little bit further, but there always seems to be something either local or matrix related or just weird that just makes life harder. But we see that without auto parent, it's the tool that it's supposed to be. So in a way, it's like maybe we should have just had it off by default, but if we did that, then people would be like, how come I can't move my object? And my cutters come with it. You know, at this point, you don't even need late parent. It's just another Lego to solve a problem. Like I keep saying about evict. Evict is something, evict and unify is just a new tool at this moment, but eventually it'll be systematic, meaning that we'll handle it for you, or at least that's my hope with it. Depends on if you know, you guys really get used to it. But here I am just zoning out, cutting this thing 30 minutes into this, no tutorial even done yet. You know, I'm just a failure. Let's look at this one. Okay, that one was a make version. I'm gonna say, oh no. So visual geometry mesh, tab in edit mode, P, loose part, select all, origin to geometry, and that's a little better of an explosion. So I don't know, something about explosions to me, just get hypnotized by them. I just love looking at the pieces. And you know, you can also play things in reverse by, I think it's, let's see, was it control spacebar? No, shift spacebar, alt shift spacebar, alt spacebar, no, control spacebar. What is the hotkey to play in reverse? Control Shift Spacebar. All right, the only hotkey I didn't think to try. And here's our animation, just not even baking out in forwards or baking out in reverse. We probably should have let it play through. But I don't know. Anytime I feel down, I always play with a broken up logo and fractures and all that just to find out what's going on. But this is definitely, I'm glad I did a test run on that. That reminds me that I should probably cut off parent shapes for the purposes of this video, and also tell users to turn off it. More importantly, that's the main thing. You know, I don't want to cause any frustrations by failing to notify users. So for that reason, I'll actually turn parent shape on, and then I could say, hey guys, let's turn off parent shape for the purposes of this. Yeah, back in the day, I used to make animations break apart basically as they were being impacted, so they could start off deactivated. It was like a 2.79 thing, but let's see if it's still around. So under Dynamics, Deactivation, Start Deactivated. And, you know, for this, we want to select everything and choose Deactivation, Copy to Selected, Start Deactivated, Copy to Selected. What that means is that now it should start up without being activated. And that means I can create, say, an icosphere. And we'll just scale it down, and you know, frame 1 here, frame 80 here. So, and we'll just put a add rigid body, and we'll make this animated. Let's try that again. And I think what's going on is it's not applied on the scale. Something about it activating a little late. I wonder if we can make this. Let's see, let's change this to mesh. I mean, we're just experimenting with physics here. I'm kind of glad I'm not doing a tutorial on it because, man, the moment it hits it, it just all just shatters. That's the problem, just boom. One hit, and it's just doomed. Like boxcutter. Boxcutter is, unlike hops, boxcutter is built as a, you know, a complete system. So if one part fails, all parts fail. It's so crazy, to me at least, to see boxcutter continue to function. But also it means that every time we get a new feature and successfully, those systems get integrated into everything instead of it being just exclusive to this cutter or something like that. Like, it really has created a stronger, more interconnected tool, which I'm much happier about in the long run. All right, so with these pieces, we're just going to select them and change this to mesh and copy to selected, and let's try that. And it just really gets crazy. I wonder if we can lower that. So let's grab these pieces, and between their sensitivity, let's set their margins to 0004 and copy to selected, and we'll let it play, and we're getting somewhere. So it almost works. Let's put 2 more zeros just to show them we mean business, and copy to selected. And, you know, y'all are just kind of here watching me do a study on physics, just kind of getting reacquainted with it. You know, there's no goal in mind here. Let's see, let's hover over this, read the tooltip, resistance of object to movement, bounciness, don't even want to mess with that. You know, I bet we can actually grab this stuff and calculate mass. There we go, calculate the mass, and we want to give it the mass of, I don't know, charcoal box cutter coming to your socks this Christmas. Is there a velocity I could put on this thing for the rigid bodies? The settings are so simplistic, which isn't a complaint. It just means not a lot of mistakes to be made here. Also, let's give it some more kilograms. And I guess we might as well give it some mass. High location, apply scale, let's try that. So if we go back, we get it just sweeping back together cleanly, but still a bit of a mess. So I wonder if we can fix that. More than likely, we can use commotion to help us fix it by just kind of offsetting the animation breakup at this portion and just let things sweep out gradually. But I don't know, sometimes I just get obsessive with the result and tweaking things forever and ever. And I don't know, I'll just get caught up in it, which is why I try to avoid studying on client work. You know, it could become a bad habit, get you fired. All right, so let's do this. Let's bake. It's bake to keyframe. Let's see, bake to keyframe. You know, I think I have to have at least something selected. Here we go, bake to keyframes, and we'll just bake that real quick. And while that's happening, I'll check my messages. All right, so we have that baked out. And so if we let this play, in fact, we don't need this anymore. We'll just let it play. And it just kind of sweeps away. In fact, this moment is the moment it just got out of control. So what I'll do is use commotion. In fact, I got my keyframe sitting on top of things, but we'll make it start at 10. And we'll place our 3D cursor here, and just using the power of commotion in there, offset, which we can offset by cursor. We'll just offset it, I guess 2 frames, threshold, maximum number of particles, and let's just offset it. And that is actually the intended result. So we look at that again. However, when you look at it like that, you kind of wish it was breaking apart the other way, but still a really interesting result. So we can play that in reverse. And in reverse, that makes sense. In fact, that is going to become a quick recording. All right, just a little bit of cleanup over here on the side. And let's get back to work. So I think now we can finally get in here and actually record this video. On the Sci-Fi HUD, by the way, not even cutting up the box cutter logo like I am. So let's do this. In and out, super fast. Maybe take another drink of water. Alright, in this video I want to talk about using boxcutter and self-cut to create a 2D HUD. So we'll go ahead and just delete the cube, and with Shift A we'll just insert a plane. I'll press SX 1.5 in order to just scale it out just a little bit. And we'll press D and switch over to custom, and we'll press C in order to make this shape the custom cutter. Under our behavior panel, we want to make sure that parent shape isn't on in order to avoid any issues. And I've actually been experimenting lately with just making cuts in different corners and then bringing it all back. So we're just cutting in various areas, and the cutter is literally the mesh itself that we are cutting, and we're just drawing rectangles and just experimenting with the various types of shapes we can get. Just trying to create just a bunch of interesting little squares and layouts. So we'll continue just drawing squares. And so finally, to top it off, we will fill in the middle section with our most interesting iterations of shapes yet. And finally for this one is everything for the prize. So with spacebar, we have now finished putting this. So of course, as you keep making cutters, it will get sequentially slower and slower due to just the law of diminishing returns when it comes to using such a thing. Even in the 2D state, the calculation can get quite intense. So what we'll do is take Ngon and just make a few cuts just to trim areas off. Just a little thing I like to do. And so with this shape, I could just press G and move it around. However, due to the complexity of this mesh, really isn't going to give me a lot of leniency here. And really keeping this non-destructive is, for the birds at this point, because we're kind of experimenting here. So the easiest way to deal with this is to visual geometry to mesh. And we'll just select everything and choose to just separate by loose parts, which will give us just a border where we can continue making cuts and modifications without any issues occurring. And so every time I make one of these, I always am encouraged to attempt to experiment and try to get a more interesting result than the previous attempts, even the demonstration attempts. So the next thing is we're going to press Shift A and add a text object. And instead of even messing with the default font, I'm going to go under the font and just load up a personal font that I have that I've become a fan of, and that is this one, Microgramma. So I'm pretty sure I got this one from Creative something, same place I get all my Affinity stuff now. But in any case, there's also this site, the font, where you can get a lot of really cool technical fonts, where I could have also possibly have gotten it there. We'll just type in warning. I love saying warning. You gotta warn people, let them know there's danger in this area. Also, if this mesh has a border, I thought that was a border of edge in between on this line, but it's not. I'm always on the lookout for Boolean errors so I can get in there and over explain why they occur. And so I'm just typing the most complicated words I can think of. Console, the number 3, also very complicated. I was just talking about earlier how I'm more into the number 11 now, and I see that number 11 is a very hard surface number, but it's not as hard surface as 7. 7 is pretty crazy, but then again, 5 is pretty good. But, you know, if you really want to talk about a number, you want to talk about 1, which is a pretty good number. And then, of course, we'll put in 24, which is the biggest number. But we'll need to use the Q menu and adjust the spacing to just, these are just kind of representing just different levels. And we'll just make this one 2, just a number 2 area. Off on the side, we'll go ahead and just play with the plane. And with this plane, what I'll do is just press Control R and just roll a couple of loop cuts. However, I want to be in edge mode when I press Control R and roll a couple of loop cuts. So it selects the loop cuts, and I can press Control B to bevel those edges and then delete the faces. And that will give me these paragraph blocks. When I was discussing the idea with Chip, he proposed that I should make paragraph blocks to simulate future text. And so that was actually a pretty good idea. So here we are making paragraph blocks, and instead of drawing panel lines over and over, we'll pretend as if we have one life to live, and we'll just duplicate this over and over. And this is actually just second nature to me, just duplicating things and making variants. And then of course we can come back at the end and do some trimming to make this look more like a paragraph block. But I've just been experimenting with these, and they're real fun to see pop in and out as well. So now that we have these paragraph blocks in, we could just go into box and just box things off. Just cut off random things just as we need them. And we'll press G to move this. In the event we need to move this, we can always tab to just drop it, and then spacebar to apply. And voila. So with this, I could just press Shift D, duplicate it, press Control A to convert the geometry to mesh, and we can start peppering our UI in here with these items as well. And these are just good to let it be known, hey, there's more to say than just warning. Got some info for you too. And they look a little fat, so we'll just adjust the scale, give them some spacing, and just place them in here. And it looks like we could be adding a few more elements. So one of the things I also like to add is a pie. So we can just scale this all in, just press M, merge it at center, and we'll just select these pieces, press YY if you're using Mesh Machine, and we'll just grab some sections of this and just break them off and just scale them to make a broken pie, and we'll just place them in. In fact, we can select this and even put a ring around it like so, and just, you know, if you're in vert mode, not face mode, we can just grab some sides, maybe grab these, E, X, scale these in, S, X, and just place them wherever it's needed. Looking at the clock, it appears that we might be nearing deadline, so I'll begin progressing to the next phases. So we'll duplicate this a couple more times. You know, it's going to be popping in and out so fast that it won't be the focal point of things. Just wanted to just create a couple of circular elements. Another thing I wanted to create that probably is going to be a little regrettable is, let's actually duplicate this. We'll scale it up, and I'll put a couple levels of subdivision on it because it's a bigger item. And we'll Shift A, just add a plane, and I'll press SY. And what we want to do is actually radial array this around the 3D cursor. But In my case, I didn't apply to scale, and so it didn't come out the way it was supposed to. But now we actually have little ticks happening on the outside of our HUD, and then of course we can go in and modify them if needed to get a more specific result. However, now that they've been added, I will go in and use Ngon, non-cyclic Ngon, to just cut out the points that are not going to be needed for the purposes of this. So anything past those points won't be needed. In fact, we can go back in radial array, adjust our ticks to get them exactly where we needed, go in edit mode and maybe duplicate to get some ticks on the inside if desired. We could even mod scroll to bring back the cutter if we need to increase this mask. In fact, if this was a bigger cutter, that edge would be easier to select, but that's probably the one time AccuCut is more of a hindrance than it is a help, but I do love me some AccuCut. So with that, now we have our little ticks, and we can actually do the same thing with this box as well and just cut off part of the circle. And it appears that we didn't get it all. So why is that? Well, I can tell you it's because of the modifier order. If we put the mirror above, put the mirror above the boolean, then it makes more sense. In fact, the more I look at this, the more I see that things could be done better. We'll just merge those at center, make that a triangular formation. Still isn't going to work. We'll bring it inside, maybe change it into something like that. And, almost insta regret, except we could duplicate this, mod scroll it till we get a combination we like, and then scroll it through the rest of the combinations until we can scroll through the rest of the mods until we get a result that's actually good. So we can select this inner ring and just scale that inward to get something just a little more happening. And then finally, to really frame this thing, we'll put a plane in the center and just place some edges. And actually, before I do that, let's inset it, which will get us something like that as a border. I forgot to apply to scale again. But by beveling these inner edges, we can get a real nice boundary loop. And we're just going to select these ticks on the corner. 2 clicks every time, too many. We'll just separate the selection, delete everything else, and this is our HUD. So a little bit of a process to get here. However, it also appears we lost a man, so we'll just mirror to the other side and pretend that never happened. So the next thing is, let's get rid of this light so it's not the thing that centers us. And maybe we also want to help this thing out. Actually, I don't know. We probably don't need to put any outside of the notification system. In fact, looking at this, I see that we also could probably use some bars and graphs in here as well. I mean, I just can't resist the urge to get in here and do some random cutting to each of these pieces to just give them a little more visual interest on what they are. Because to me, they almost look like they represent different laboratories. So we could be putting all sorts of symbols and things in here as well. But instead, what we'll do is just select everything. And because boxcutter has a thing where if snapping's on, when you hold control, it will deselect your object. So I'm just going to turn snapping off. So I can just press Control A and turn everything into a mesh. And from here, now that everything's a mesh, we can just join it all together. Or actually, let's not join it all together. Let's slap everything with blank materials. So we grab the text, blank material. We grab the boxes, and we allow these to also get their own blank material. In fact, I'm not going to waste. In fact, Shift S, origin to geometry. And now let's try to select that even faster. Every object is like So we just give it a bigger hotspot circle, or really just click these things in the heart of their origins, where we think they are born from. So now we can just press Alt M, blank material on these, and we'll have to wait a moment because we have, I guess, 189 objects selected. I always got to look at my object selected count whenever I'm doing things, because, you know, usually I never think about it, but some of these things that we attempt to automate are pretty click heavy in the amount of strokes that we seek to save. In fact, just this one is like 24 clicks by itself. You can just give it a try if you have any doubts. So we'll select these, all the rings, and we'll slap them with a blank material as well. Keep in mind that all these materials are just placeholders. In fact, let's try it again, blank material. All right. So let's see, what else is there left? It's just these little houses in here. And I wonder if we can select them by color. Shift G. You know, Shift G should have something for like selecting by material type and things like that. But, you know, selecting things by material is just one of those things you just can't do in vanilla Blender. It's kind of weird. I wonder how we'll get around that. We can just, let's see, what material does it have? It has no material. And we have to select everything that has 0 materials. So let's actually take this moment to bring in batch operations, which in my case is actually already enabled. So let's see if batch operations can actually help us in this, or if this video is going to be going down in flames because I didn't fully rehearse the steps that I was going to need to practice on this. And I don't know if batch operations is going to be able to select. Let's see, when I select, I want this to be collections object. So that means that whenever I click this, it should select it. So now I'm able to select things by their material. So I'll be able to select something, hide it. Select something, hide it. Select something, hide it. And through this process of elimination, I can quickly get to where I'm trying to get to with this particular situation. But sometimes you'll run into a problem in which there's just no built-in Blender way to resolve it, in which case, you know, blank material has your back, or batch operations has your back. So just a nice little shout out to them. I don't always get to segue them into my content, but they're always there for me whenever I need them, especially when it comes to dealing with all this selection business. So now we have our, okay, for a minute I was like, what's going on here? It's actually my custom cutters are on the same collection as well. So this is a good opportunity to talk about eviction, where if we press Control on Unity Evict, it will evict all the custom cutters that are improperly placed due to a certain glitch with cutters that I need to talk about sometime in the correct collection. So now to begin working towards a conclusion, we can actually just put a plane over here on the side and just go into Ngon without cyclic on and just cut some interesting patterns, similar to my last tutorial talking about cyclic, where we were making some rigid body simulation things. And that one was a gamble. That one is also a gamble. And I'm always pressing spacebar, but you can also double left click on the final point in order to complete your operation. And that's actually more cuts than I even need. So we'll go back to custom, C, mark this as custom cutter. And on this side, we will just turn this into a slice, maybe go full destructive. and we can just start slicing things up. You can see off on the side that my cutter that was marked got re-revealed. That wouldn't happen if I would have actually marked it as a wire first. One of our goals with this box cutter release is to expand on the custom cutter capabilities. And once you see what I'm talking about with the video on that, you'll definitely be a little more excited about it. But it definitely means that we removed all the filters that limit you on what custom cutters you're able to use, which seem to be a little problematic. We'll go ahead and just remove that. And let's bring everything back, and we'll just select everything and just evict again, just to make sure. I like to re-evict, but because of the problem that I saw in box cutter on the horizon, that's why there's a solution on the hop side. So now we have our HUD created and everything's a little piece, but it's not enough little pieces. Let's tap into edit mode, select all, and let's separate by loose parts. Now we can select everything and origin to geometry. And now there's a million ways for this contraption to fall apart. So if we go into our in panel, we can go under commotion, and I'm going to move everything visible to a collection called AFF. But I'm also going to create an empty, and we're going to move it to a collection called EFF. So AFF is short for effectors, and EFF is short for affected. So really effectors, affected, but you know, that's just how it came across to me in my head. So apologize for any confusion there. And we'll just turn on proximity effector and set these to 0. And I'm just playing with these parameters. Once you see what's going on when you begin playing with these collection controls, you'll be able to go in and actually perfect this to your heart's content. But this is basically the end of the tutorial. Now you can see the final result. But the thing is that I built this with all these placeholder materials. So let's talk about actually getting a actual result, which this whole metal look could actually work. But I did want to use this video to segue and talk about about material scroll. Material Scroll has been updated for this version, and now Material Scroll is its own man, a little different than Blink Material Scroll. But if we shift click it, we can go into Destructive Material Scroll. So in order to really see this, I'm going to press T twice to jump this type to emission. But as we scroll through different types of emissive types, we can actually change all of these objects sharing the same material at the same time. So I chose a frame where there's light, so now you can see that it's green, and we'll make the secondary color of all of them red, and I'll just copy and paste them as we move along. So I'll select another piece, and we'll just shift click, and before I scroll, I'll press TT, and we'll just kind of see what colors we get. I actually like that yellow. We'll select another one, and we'll shift scroll TT, and scroll until we find a color we like. Maybe one that kind of goes along with the same scheme that we already have going here. Maybe a little too close. So we can select this 11 and shift scroll TT and just scroll till we find the right example. And the same thing with just every part that's left, just selecting it, jumping into emissive material scroll by pressing TT. After jumping into destructive material scroll, you can begin scrolling through just random material combinations. And I'm just looking at the colors in the viewport and just thinking, you know, is this one gonna go good with my setup, or is it gonna be something that clashes? So, and every little piece is special on this thing. So that's probably the best part of all. In fact, we could press Alt V. I was gonna say Alt V, and we could just turn on bloom. And now we can look at our object with the bloom instead of adding a viewport to it. If we come out of overlays off mode, we can now see kind of what we're getting with our HUD. And so if we move our empty around, you can see that we're basically getting this HUD that's just disintegrating. And everything's actually kind of color coordinated right now, which is a little different than my previous example. So on this side of things, we can actually go for a entirely different combination of colors. And you know, I always just like to experiment. So, you know, earlier I was really into a yellow. So let's select that, and we can just start giving things just the colors that we want them to transition into instead of something so random. So there we go. So now we have that, the worst color combinations, one that's a little bit more to my liking. And so we're just kind of just playing with our HUD, just moving the empty, just watching everything move. And it looks pretty interesting, but I do want to talk about some of the settings like fade and fall off. In fact, fall off is actually pretty cool. I enjoy playing with the fall off and the fade amounts, and also location. You know, right now there's no location happening, but we could say put something in here like, I don't know, 30. And so now as we move it, it actually begins adjusting the locations of things, which I found to be really cool, but I didn't want it actually firing outside of my sci-fi constraint that I had set up for it. So if we have it go up to like, I don't know, 0.1, then it actually looks a little bit better, at least in terms of being inside of a HUD. And keep in mind, this is just a test experiment. So we're just kind of freestyling here. In fact, we look at this, we can see that the pieces are rotating up, which maybe we don't want. Maybe we actually want this to rotate on this one on the 90. And if we look at this, we can see that that one's actually not the axis we want either. We actually want the Z, and we probably want it to rotate at least 180. So when things come in, they just kind of flip into place, which to me just looks really interesting. You know, we could even play with the scale a little bit. Like right now, we're just talking about just, you know, random or numbers that I like in particular. But you can get some really interesting results just playing with random numbers. Like we just put a 20 scale in there, and that was a pretty interesting result. So when it comes to actually getting the final result, let's talk about that. So at the very beginning of our time frame, or we can actually start our empty where it's non-impacted, so it just looks normal, and just press I, set our keyframe. We can actually turn on frame recording for this to just make things easier. And we could let it stay normal till frame about 40. And then between this and frame 112, we want to begin exiting the scene. Something like that. And then we just come back. We'll actually let that hold for a few seconds. And the keyframe that I had over here for the first frame, we'll just shift deduplicate it. So that way it just transitions back, but we'll offset it so that way it reveals it just right. And then we can just let it sit and then loop. So if we let this play out in action, we can see the empty rolls out of frame, which causes the UI to disappear. And then it comes back and it just sits there, flashing through the 2 iterations and then starting over once again. So that is the kind of UI creation process using 2D and boxcutter, just getting in there, having a little fun. Of course, to end this, we can turn this into something that's actually proper, so or just presentable. So I will just choose bake, and so right now it's actually playing through the timeline, baking the proximity effector to the meshes themselves, which means that now I'm able to go in and adjust this to my heart's content and make this exactly what I need it to be. So we're just letting this run through the timeline. Usually it only just takes a moment, depending on the length of your timeline, of course. And now it's over. So we'll come out of rendered mode and just see what we got as far as our AFF goes. And we can just Control G to make this a group. And we're just going to call this hud2. I created a file earlier called hud1, just in case I want to use all these HUDs together to really let people know the warning. So I'm just going to create a new collection, and we'll just call this SCN for scene. Delete the extra character, and we'll just Shift A, add a collection instance of hud2, turn off proximity effector, and if we just let this play through, this is basically the animation result that we have. and it's something that we can just use in our viewport. So because of that, let me undo those keyframes and turn this off, but let's bring in a plane and just scale it up. And this is the laziest sci-fi interface device you've ever seen. I'm just warning you now. We'll press 2, hit it with solidify. I'm gonna grab one corner and control click on mark in order to bevel the verts. Go back into object mode and actually apply to scale, so that way we're able to see what we're getting on the bevel. And then I'll mirror it to both sides, which will get us something like this. However, I think I accidentally created, oh wait, no I didn't. So we want to press X to reset to default, and we'll mirror that to the other side because we do not want multiple modifiers. And let's actually scroll this through material combination until we find something that's good for a HUD holder. So maybe something like that going on is going to work. And we can actually turn snapping back on because we do want to jump off the centerpiece. Maybe not with custom, sorry about that. We want to jump off with box, my favorite shape of all. And let's just cut through this. And let's look at this. So we want it to actually fit around. So I'm just holding Alt while I drag this dot in order to keep it uniform. And we'll get it about there. Press B, bevel it just right. And maybe at this last second, I decided I don't want it to be a cutout. I want it to be a slice. So let's slice it out. And this shape looks terrible. So let's Alt click sharpen to put a weighted normal on it. Let's also put a weighted normal on that one. And as far as blank material goes, shift clicking it to add a glass is one of my favorite things to do with blank material, which basically gives us the foundations of a little sci-fi interface panel. So I was actually creating the same thing earlier, in case you're wondering why I'm getting such a nice result. I always like to rehearse my tutorials for you guys. So we can just scale this in. And if we take a look at this, this is now our final result. So it's just a sci-fi interface that just shows up warning, warning, warning. All these levels are orange and blue and orange and blue. So just an experiment to show you guys to get started with. Of course, I'll have the link to Commotion in the description. It's one of my favorite tools. I recommend everybody just give it a shot. It's just so easy and fun to get into. In a way, you could say this like the opposite of our tools. However, his tool also just focuses on the motion graphics side of things. So definitely a lord at keeping things simple. In fact, let's mirror this over to the other side, and let's mirror this over to the other side. Let's try that again. Mirror to the other side, and let's mirror. Actually, let's press A and make it a new mirror, and definitely mirror to the other side. Sometimes when the mirror is being crazy with your existing modifier, it's easy to just add a new one because it will definitely do what you need. And I mean, I still plan on doing a video talking about mirror more in depth in the future. Right there, we see a cut didn't actually go through. And I'm curious to why. Let's try that again. Well, there it is going through. And so, just because I can't stop, won't stop. We'll grab this area, put a little circle there. And it looks like the bevel is just not catching. So in fact, it looks like the boolean isn't catching either. So let's try that again. I do not know. Okay, I think it's because I'm in destructive mode, and this is a non-destructive creation. So therefore, it's not going to destructively cut into a mesh that is a solidified plane that technically does not exist. So that's something to just keep in mind if you're using hops, that when working non-destructive and destructive at the same time, you definitely cannot do it on a shape that is not destructively capable. So here we are, we're looking at our final result. We can actually press Q in the hard ops menu with nothing selected and just add a camera. And let's bring in this camera. We want to really look at this slow. I've been setting my timelines to take about 6,000 frames just to be more fun. We'll put a giant plane in here and put it directly below just to really end this on a key shot fill. Just scroll through material floors until we find just the right floor, and then find the right environment to really convey across what we're going for with our HUD. And then if you really want to top it off, let's go under blank light, where we can really just scroll through some combinations until we're lighting up our HUD exactly as we want it to be seen. So even though in the render, while it's showing in real time, you can see it getting a little jaggy on the shadows, the intended result of getting in here and showing a HUD, mission accomplished. So with that, I can wrap up this video, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this video. I don't know if I should put it on cutting room floor or what. A video going on that long on my general channel. I'll have to second think it. Just kidding. I'm just gonna do it. Don't watch it if you don't want to watch a video so long. I mean, look at it behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, an hour and a half. So you guys are the real troopers. So with that, wrap this video up. Thanks for watching.